Welcome to what Star Wars Episode 1 should have been. But wait a second, isn't this a lot like Belated Meteor's What If It Was Good videos? Well, yes. Yes, it is. And if you haven't seen his videos, you definitely should. Here's a link. But this is different in the sense that while he was using the prequels as a foundation and then fixing up those movies' numerous problems as he went along, what you're going to see here is a complete overhaul. From top to bottom, everything is different. The only things that are the same in this are the characters and certain events that need to happen, like the Clone Wars, Luke and Leia being born, Anakin becoming Darth Vader, etc. But how we're going to get to those things, totally different. So this version is a complete alternate history of what the prequels could have been. And I'm pretty sure that nothing that I introduce here is violating Star Wars lore, but having said that, I haven't read every single book or comic in the expanded universe or played every single video game that has ever been. So you'll have to forgive me if I accidentally step on some of the expanded universe lore here or there. But as far as the movies goes, this should fit in just fine with those. So, let's begin. A shuttle lands in among an alien jungle, and out steps Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin. Yes, Anakin. Anakin is not a child, he's a 17-year-old. The same age that Luke was when we first met him in A New Hope. We don't need to start the movie with Anakin as a child being discovered by the Jedi, because Anakin's story is not about how he became a Jedi, it's about how he fell from being a Jedi. So him being discovered by the Jedi as a kid is pretty much irrelevant to the overall arc of his story. I mean, sure, it would be nice to see the two of them meet for the very first time, but you don't need to have a whole movie with him as a kid just for that one scene. They start to make their way through the jungle, and Obi-Wan says to Anakin, "Can you sense anything with the Force?" It's very strange, because I can't sense anything, not even a single life form. Neither can I. But have a look at that. He points up into the trees, and there we see a lizard thing clinging to a tree trunk staring at the both of them. I think it's a Salamir. If you've ever read the Heir to the Empire books, then you would have heard of a Salamir before. They're animals that naturally create a bubble around them that nullifies the Force. And if you get a whole bunch of them together, that effect can be multiplied to cover a massive area. They look and see that the entire jungle is filled with hundreds and hundreds of these creatures. Well, that explains why we can't sense anything. But I thought you could only find these things on their homeworld. They must have been imported here. I get the feeling this entire jungle was imported here. Someone's gone to a lot of effort to hide whatever's here. They make their way to the center of the jungle, and they discover a gigantic installation built into the side of a mountain. Obi-Wan and Anakin keep hidden among the trees, and they bust out the binoculars. It looks like a lot of that place is underground. Yes. Who knows how large that place really is. Some blast doors open, and Obi-Wan and Anakin watch on as out marches an army of soldiers in military formation. The army stands to attention before its commander, and after shouting an order, they all take off their helmets to reveal that they all look identical, and they are all ugly, orc-like monsters. They must be clones. And if I had to guess, our friends up there in the trees are all clones as well. And this is very troubling. We must tell the Jedi Council at once. A few bullets cut into the tree line above their heads. Yes, I said bullets, not laser blasts. Why? Because this story is taking place 30 years prior to the events of the original trilogy. So the technology is going to be 30 years less advanced. And yes, before anybody says in the comments, I'm aware that in the expanded universe, technology has been exactly the same for like 500,000 years or whatever it is. But considering that Disney has completely erased all of the expanded universe except for anything that relates to the new movies, none of that really matters anymore. And yes, I know that there were blasters in the actual prequel movies, but since we're retelling those stories, that doesn't count either. So there's literally nothing left in canon or out of it that says when blasters were invented. And besides, this is just a fan fiction, so it doesn't have to be exactly perfect with every single detail. In this universe that I'm creating, I'm going to set some parameters for the Jedi's abilities, what they can do, how they can do it, and what their limits are. For example, we all know that the Jedi can move stuff around with the Force, but I'm making it that while they can move around physical objects, they have difficulty with, like, energy, as it's not really a physical thing. This is why the Jedis carry lightsabers, in case they ever come up against a Sith or a rogue Jedi or some other kind of Force user. Their opponent won't be able to use the Force to block a lightsaber blade that's coming at them, because it's mostly energy. That's why they have lightsabers. So in this universe, the Jedi only carry lightsabers for that situation. They don't really use them the rest of the time, because they can just use the Force to like block bullets from hitting them, or to push people away. So it's pretty cool to be a Jedi, right? Because you're almost invincible. Unless someone were to invent a gun that could shoot similar energy to the lightsaber, that would be really bad news. But it's safe to assume that that's never gonna happen, right? A siren goes off at the installation, alerting all the clones, and they all start charging towards the jungle. Now might be a good time for us to make ourselves scarce. They run back to their ship, jump in, take off, and as Anakin pilots them up into space, Obi-Wan says that they're too deep into the Outer Rim to call Coruscant directly, and they'll have to make their way to the closest planet to relay the message. And the closest planet is Alderaan. On this paradisaic world of Alderaan, we see young Padme having lunch with her family, which includes her brother Owen Lars and his fiancée Beru, who is not yet Aunt Beru. It turns out that Padme has caught the eye of the young Prince of Alderaan. Let's call him Prince Valium.
I'm sorry, it's the hair. Prince Valium.
Padme's family is not royalty or anything, but they are this planet's equivalent of nobles. So, of course, her family is pretty happy about the prospect of joining the royal family. But she, possessing the qualities that we will later see in her daughter Leia, is much more of an independent thinker and has her own plans other than just getting married. Back at the clone base, we see Darth Maul. He fires up his hollow communicator, or whatever those things are called, and he contacts Palpatine. He tells him that the Jedi have discovered the base, but Palpatine just kind of shrugs and says, nah, doesn't really matter. The dark side has protected us once again. Our merchandise has already arrived in Alderaan, so our time has now come. And you know what that means, my young apprentice? Yes, my lord. War. Obi-Wan and Anakin arrive at the capital of Alderaan, and they land at the palace and are welcomed by a whole bunch of officials and Prince Valium. Obi-Wan explains that he needs to contact the Jedi Council, and Prince Valium leads him inside, leaving Anakin to make small talk with all the officials. Suddenly, Anakin abruptly pauses the conversation and turns around and looks to see a little kid peeking out from behind a pillar, kind of staring at Anakin in awe, as this is the first time that kid has ever seen a Jedi. One of the officials says that that's the prince's nephew or whoever, and Anakin, being able to sense that the kid is wanting to ask him all these questions about being a Jedi, but he's too shy to, he walks over there, kneels down with a big smile, and he starts talking to the kid. Because, you know, Anakin's a good guy. Of course he's a good guy. Why wouldn't he want to talk to this kid? And through this scene here of Anakin answering the kid's questions about being a Jedi, we're able to flesh out some of the guidelines of the Jedi's powers to the audience. He explains the whole thing of not being able to block energy that we already talked about, but he also explains that when he started his training, one of the ways that he got used to using the Force was by Obi-Wan doing a thing that Jedis can do in this film, that being transferring their Force power into someone else for a short time. They use this just in training as a sort of Force version of training wheels, sort of to help the student to get used to having a handle on the Force, but with the older Jedi still being there to be able to guide the student. They also use this maybe to like help heal injuries faster and things like that. But one thing that they are not allowed to do with this ability is to have more than one Jedi transferring their power into one person. It is possible to have a whole group of Jedis all sending their power to one person, but it's forbidden because no one Jedi should be allowed to have that much power because it could corrupt them. I don't know whether anything like this already exists in the expanded universe, but you know, whatever. I'm putting in my stuff here. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, has just got done explaining to the Council what they discovered on the planet. Yoda puts him on hold and the Council all discuss what to do. Yoda is convinced that this is the source of the disturbance in the Force that they've been sensing. They all agree, and because this Jedi Council, they actually do something rather than just sitting around on their butts all day, they bring Obi-Wan back into the call and they tell him that there are about 200 Jedi scattered throughout that sector of space, and they're going to have them all converge on Alderaan so that Obi-Wan and Anakin can then lead them from there back to the planet, and they can seize control of the base to find out what's going on. Obi-Wan agrees, he finishes the call, and he walks out to meet up with Anakin, on the way explaining to the prince what has just happened. When they arrive outside, they see a big crowd of kids and onlookers all standing around and cheering as Anakin takes turns using the Force to levitate kids through the air, kind of making them fly like Superman. And what does Obi-Wan do? Does he get angry? Does he start scolding Anakin like he always would in the prequels? No, he starts smiling and laughing as well. Because they're not Vulcans, they're Jedis, okay? It's okay for them to have a little fun. They don't have to be these boring monks all the time. In fact, Obi-Wan uses this opportunity to teach Prince Valium, who is kind of stressing out about hearing of all these recent developments, that it's important to take time to enjoy the little things in life, referring to Anakin flying the kids around, especially when things are starting to look bleak. And then, who should round the corner but Padme with a few of her friends? Her and Anakin lock eyes, and all of a sudden, Anakin seems to lose concentration and he drops the kid that he's levitating. But he quickly manages to recover and catch the kid before any harm is done, and just sort of passes the whole thing off as, yeah, I just made him sort of swoop low. I didn't drop him. It was all part of the ride. But of course, he did almost drop him. Then the prince's dad, the king of Alderaan, approaches Obi-Wan and invites him and Anakin to dine with them at a feast that they're holding that night. And since Obi-Wan and Anakin don't really have anything to do other than to wait around for the rest of the Jedi to show up, he accepts. Over on the other side of the planet, the sun is just starting to set, and we find ourselves in a city that is the trade center of the planet. And this is called the Cloud District. Yeah, that's original.
Do you get to the Cloud District very often? Oh, what am I saying? Of course you don't.
By the gods, no.
People are walking the streets relaxed when down from the sky drops 3 gigantic starships that hover above the city. Hundreds of smaller shuttles fly out from them and start swooping down on the city. And as the clone troopers in this version are crazy orc types, they just run around and start shooting everything that moves. It's kind of like that Lancelot scene in Monty Python's Holy Grail. Hey! And there are no soldiers or anything to fight off the clones because
Alderaan is peaceful. We have no weapons. You can't
You would
possibly...
prefer another target, a military target? Then name the system.
so unopposed, they zero in on the biggest building and they storm the place, rounding up all the workers into a warehouse area, and in walks Maul. And he has someone with him. Fans of the EU will recognise her as Darth Talon from the Legacy area. But here, I'm really just using her image and her name, but she's basically a totally different character. I picked her just because I want Darth Maul to have a sister, and she looks like she could be his sister, you know, she's got the red and the black, with all the tattoos and everything. So apart from her look and her name, she's basically a whole new character. Maul uses the Force to rip open the vault door to a storage room that's filled with lightsaber crystals. A couple of clones carry in a few crates and pop them open to to reveal what we all recognize as the classic Star Wars blasters. He levitates one out, plucks a crystal from the vault at the same time, and in front of them all he opens the blaster and slides in the crystal. Just then the manager of the factory decides to step in. Excuse me, but you've clearly got what you came here for, so please just let us all go. There's no need to hey now. Hey, whoa, stop, no! Back at the capital, Obi-Wan and Anakin are enjoying themselves at the feast, and as Anakin goes out onto the balcony to admire the view, little old Padme appears next to him. They exchange pleasantries for a few moments, until they fall silent, and then Padme says, "So, you were about to drop that kid earlier today, right?" "What? What are you talking about?" "When you saw me in the courtyard, you almost dropped that kid you were flying around." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." "No, hey, I mean, if this is your way of asking me to fly you around for a bit, you need only ask." "Oh, no, thanks." No, it's no trouble, you know, I could fly you right off the edge of this balcony." "Oh yeah, will I actually make it back again?" "I make no promises." They both share a bit of a laugh, and Padme shifts to look back into the party, and her eye catches Prince Valium talking to her parents. Anakin immediately senses the emotions shift within her, and he looks at her. "Don't worry, they'll get over it." "Who?" "Your parents. When you tell them that you don't want to marry the prince, they'll be upset, but their love for you is very strong, so they'll get over it." "So, you Jedi can read people's minds." "Well, I'm not a Jedi yet, but no, it's not really reading a mind as much as sensing. It's all emotions, urges, intentions towards certain actions, but never specific thoughts. You know, I just felt your reaction at seeing the prince with your parents, I felt the collective hopes of all three of them in unison, and I just sort of put two and two together. I know I should be happy that he's interested in me, and I know he is a good person, it's just I don't feel it for him, and you know, I can't make myself." She snaps a sharp look at Anakin. "But don't tell anyone." He smiles back. "I'll make you a deal. I won't tell anyone if you don't tell anyone that I almost dropped a kid on his head earlier today." She smiles back. "It's a deal." Suddenly some officials run into the party and whisper something to the king, who is talking to Obi-Wan. He nods to Obi-Wan and the two of them excuse themselves from the party. An official steps out on the balcony and says to Anakin, "The king requests your presence." The officials lead him into a room of the palace where the king already is. They're joined by the prince, and the projector fires up, displaying the Jedi Council that they are communicating with. "Master Yoda, Alderaan is under attack!" Anakin starts working the controls and brings up some security footage from the streets of the Cloud District. "Those look like the clones that we saw." "Agreed. Master Yoda, from the size of that facility we found, there could be thousands of these clones here. 200 Jedi are already on their way to Alderaan. They should arrive within a day." "That might not be soon enough. Alderaan's a peaceful planet. We don't even have any weapons. And there's not enough ships to evacuate the entire planet." "Transports to you we shall send." Anakin's still jabbing at the controls. "Master, there is a shipyard with transport ships in a system that the Jedi will be passing through soon. If they commandeer those ships and bring them here with them, we can evacuate the people when the 200 Jedi arrive. But they still won't be here for another day. Obi-Wan, your mission is to hold Alderaan for the next 24 hours. Master Windu, it's just myself and Anakin. We can't protect the entire planet against thousands of clones." "Obi-Wan, the Battle of Intercepting Paths. Remember, do you?" "Of course, the Battle of Intercepting Paths. What? What are you talking about?" "Thank you, Master Yoda. May the Force be with you." "And you as well, Master." The call ends and Anakin gets to work pulling up a hologram map of the planet. "What are we going to do?" "What did Master Yoda mean with the Battle of Intercepting Paths? It's a famous battle in the Jedi archives. Basically, a handful of Jedi had to defend a very large area against an army that was much larger than they could handle. Very much like this situation. Well, what did they do? They knew they couldn't defeat the army itself, so they instead focused on restricting their enemies' movements, and they did this so well that the army's progress slowed to a crawl, and eventually the army had to just leave because they were running out of supplies. We could do the same thing here. Restrict their movements across the planet until the 200 Jedi and the transports arrive. How long would it take to get here from the Cloud District if you're traveling by land? About 1 or 2 days? So they'll travel by air then. So that's where we'll restrict them. We don't have an air force for that. Do not worry, Your Highness. At this time when your world needs pilots, the Force has brought to you one of the best star pilots in the galaxy.
He was the best star pilot in the galaxy. And a cunning warrior.
Back at the Jedi Temple in Coruscant, the Council have just got off the call. It's strange that an army would attack the Cloud District before it would attack the capital. What's there that's so important? Suddenly in walks Chancellor Palpatine. Yes, Chancellor Palpatine. As in this, he is already the Chancellor. He interrupts and is all like, "What's with all these rumors about Alderaan being attacked?" They tell him that it's true and that they're sending the 200 Jedi. He responds with fake shock and he says, well, see, this is why I keep saying that we need a galactic army to help police Republic territory. That could have prevented this attack on Alderaan. But, you know, since you guys keep blocking my attempts to create one, this Alderaan thing is kind of your fault, you know? Hey, we've been over this. Each planet has their own army to protect them. Yes, well, every planet except Alderaan. But policing the galaxy is the job of the Jedi. It seems that recent events show that maybe you could use a little help. The Jedi are entrusted with policing the Republic, not an army, but the Jedi. It has to be them because only they will not abuse that authority. I understand, I just hope for the sake of those poor souls there in Alderaan that our trust in you as our protectors is not misplaced. Back on Alderaan, the King is releasing an emergency broadcast telling everyone who has a ship capable of interstellar travel to evacuate the planet immediately, and everybody that doesn't to make their way to the capital to get out on the transports when they arrive. So the result is a mass exodus of ships from the planets and a swarm of millions of refugees towards the capital. Back in the Cloud District, Maul and Talon are watching the broadcast, and she says that they're ready to move on the capital. Maul says that his master has directed them to inflict maximum damage on civilians in order to make the Jedi look more incompetent. Talon says that since all the civilians are fleeing to the capital, she can fly over with all their ships and just bomb it into oblivion, wiping out everybody in one go. By the way, Talon commands the Air Force, while Maul commands the ground forces. That's like how they've divided up their army. Maul likes the idea and he gives her the green light and she takes off with the fleet. At the palace, we see a big group of civilian pilots all gathered together in a big hall in the palace. And the prince is calling for them all to quiet down. They eventually do, and he thanks them for coming and he says that Alderaan needs their help. He introduces Anakin and Obi-Wan and they walk up. As they do, he whispers to them that they better have a good sales pitch because everyone here is scared stiff. Obi-Wan nods to Anakin and Anakin steps forward to address the crowd. As Anakin is the brains behind this entire plan, Obi-Wan wants him to present it to the civilian pilots. By the way, these pilots, they have ships that can travel around the planet, but they're not big enough for interstellar travel, which is why they're all still here on Alderaan. Anakin explains the situation, clone army on the way to kill them all that don't have an air force, so they need civilian pilots to help defend the city. So here's the plan that Anakin has cooked up. The clone fleet is flying towards the capital, flying above the clouds to avoid turbulence and to travel faster. So the plan is the civilian pilots will hide in the clouds until the fleet passes overhead. Then they rise up right in the middle of them. There are 3 big starships, so as long as they stay positioned in between them, those starships can't shoot at them with the big cannons that they have, because then they'll also hit each other. And since the civilian ships have no weapons, they're going to modify the escape pods, which all ships have, by packing them with TNT or other kinds of improvised explosives to turn them into makeshift bombs. And if they hit the starship's engines enough, they will have to land to repair the damage before they can continue, which should buy the capital the time that it needs. However, once they start attacking the starships, they're going to release the fighter jets to take them out, but Anakin explains that since the civilian ships are much slower, they can actually use that to their advantage, because the fighter jets will have a much shorter window of opportunity to fire once they're in range, because they'll keep overtaking them. He also says that since the civilian ships are much slower, they'll be much more maneuverable and they can zigzag and evade fire a lot better.
And a cunning warrior.
Naturally, all the pilots are a bit worried since they're just regular people, they're not military. So Anakin assures them that, insert inspirational speech here.
But tonight, we dine in hell!
No, that's too psychotic.
Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
No, too cheesy.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
No, that's not really appropriate.
Good morning.
Yes, perfect. Let's go with that.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind. Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interest. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night, we will not vanish without a fight, we're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our
Alderaan.
day.
So Anakin manages to rally all of the pilots into a civilian air force to take on the clones. And this ragtag collection of ships, going up against a much larger, more powerful and better equipped enemy, will kind of give us glimpses of the spirit of the Rebel Alliance that is to come, as they were always a ragtag collection of ships against a much bigger and better equipped enemy. So the newly formed Alderaan Air Force makes the changes to their ships and takes to the skies, with Anakin and Obi-Wan leading the charge. They all take their position in the clouds and wait. And here we can have a cool bit of suspense as the enemies approach. Like maybe the shadow of the ships above darkens the clouds, freaking out some of the pilots early on. Once they're directly overhead, Anakin ignites his engines and plows up through the clouds with a war cry, followed by all the others. And oh my god! These ships are gigantic up close. They are literally floating cities. In fact, just on the mere side of these ships, a couple of the pilots just bail out right there. Anakin tells everyone to target the center ship, and he fires a missile, landing the first strike on the enemy. The sight of that fireball erupting draws the rest of the pilots into action, and they swarm like angry mosquitoes at the monstrous starship. Wave after wave of ships fire their escape pods and strike the engines, and slowly the ship's engines start to sputter and stall as the ship descends below the clouds. Everyone cheers in victory. And then the fighter jets arrive. And here we get to see why Anakin is such a skilled pilot, as he has the only ship with actual weapons, so he's able to take these jets on. He ducks and weaves like a maniac as missiles fly past him. He spins around and fires with surgical precision, cutting down every target that meets his crosshairs. Obi-Wan's calling out from beside him, "Missile on our left, target on our right," and Anakin maneuvers to dodge one and the other as if he can see it all with his own eyes. He is truly a spectacular pilot. And as he is the only ship that can actually shoot back, the jets are converging on him like moths to a flame. Anakin uses this to his advantage, trying to keep all of them engaged with him so that less of them are going after the civilian pilots that are targeting the engines. But a lot of them are starting to die. These pilots have never been in a dogfight before, and it shows. Some of them are crashing into each other trying to avoid the jets, others are being cut down by missiles they didn't even see coming, others are swooping past the engines trying to fire their pods and are just spinning out of control and kamikazing right into them. It's brutal, man. Brutal. Looking up into the sky from the ground, we just see the flashes of explosion behind the clouds and flaming wrecks of ships just falling from the sky like raindrops of death. But the fight between these two starships is so constricted in that small space that it's very tough for the clone fighter jets as well. With all the different ships mixed in together, they're missing a lot. Some of them are even accidentally hitting each other. One of the two remaining starships starts to weaken, and Anakin uses his last missile to blast the engine into submission, and slowly it descends beneath the clouds as well. But as it descends, the last starship now has a clear line of fire, and the cannons take aim and start blasting Anakin's fleet to pieces. They open fire, destroying both Anakin's ships and its own jets, just in an effort to get these guys off its back. That's it for most of the civilian pilots who are left. They take off, but it's no good. They're just being massacred. In the chaos, Anakin's ship gets clipped by a missile and they go down. Plummeting down from the clouds, Anakin is just barely able to get control of the ship to make an emergency landing without killing both of them. But in the impact of the crash, Obi-Wan is knocked unconscious. Anakin grabs him and drags him out of the wreckage of the ship just as it ignites and explodes behind him. He checks Obi-Wan's pulse to make sure he's okay, and then he looks up into the sky, seeing the last of the starships continuing on its way to the city. As the fiery debris of the former civilian air force rains down all around him, and he says to himself, "What have I done? I failed." Just then, the holocron on his belt beeps. It's the palace of Alderaan. They connect him to a call they're already having with the Jedi Council. The king tells the council that the air attack failed, and he begs them for help. Everyone in the council looks around at each other, knowing that it's pretty much over. Then Palpatine, who has been lurking around in the background, steps forward. What about transference? What? As I understand it, you Jedi can transfer your power into another person. What if all the Jedi here at the temple, and those 200 on their way there, transferred all of their power into one of the 2 remaining Jedis? Then that Jedi would be strong enough to destroy the entire Air Force before it reached the capital. That's forbidden. Please, if there's anything you can do, then do it. Is it possible? Well, yes, it's possible, but please! My people are defenseless! The room falls silent and everyone turns to Yoda. With a heavy sigh, he reluctantly agrees. But Yoda insists that they transfer their power into Obi-Wan since he's the older and more experienced one, and thus is less likely to be corrupted by having that much power. But ooh, he's knocked unconscious, so it looks like it's gonna have to be Anakin. The palace relays the message to Anakin of what they're about to do, and of course, him being keen to stop that last starship and those fighter jets is more than happy to oblige. And he sits down and starts to meditate. Yoda puts up a hologram image all around the Jedi Temple, and also to the 200 Jedi on the transport, which we see the leader of which is Qui-Gon Jinn, and he tells them to transfer their power to Anakin. And for the first time ever in Star Wars history, we see almost every single Jedi meditating at the same time, sending all of their force power towards just one person, Anakin Skywalker. And as they do, he begins to change. At the peak of the transfer, power explodes from Anakin. A blue blast of pure energy fires up into the sky, and the starship and hundreds of the fighter jets are swept aside like a heap of dry leaves in the face of a hurricane. All of their circuitry is fried. The metal that makes up the ships is warped, and as fire starts exploding out from various points of the starship, it plummets from the sky like a stone, followed by the spinning descent of the fighter jets. Inside that starship, we see Talon, who was the captain of the ship, jumping into an escape pod that shoots her out of the ship at the last second. From the palace, they watch as the starship crashes in the far distance. And millions of people cheer as they've just been saved. Back on the hillside, the transfer ends and Anakin collapses on the ground like a rag doll. He has had so much power going through his body that his entire nervous system is completely fried. Obi-Wan and Anakin lie side by side on the ground, unconscious. Back at the Jedi Temple, the King of Alderaan joyfully shouts that it works, but nobody in the council cheers except Chancellor Palpatine. And one by one, each member of the Jedi Council silently files out of the room, until only Palpatine is left with a big smirk on his face. At the palace, Padme runs up to the prince amidst all of the celebrating crowds of the people that fills the halls. She grabs him by the arm and says that they should go and try to find Anakin and Obi-Wan amongst all the debris. He agrees and they rush off together. On the hillside, Obi-Wan starts to wake up and he sees Anakin lying there. He goes over to check him, not knowing what has just happened, and Anakin is still charged up with all this force energy. So when Obi-Wan touches him, he's basically zapped and is sent stumbling back a few steps. He looks around at all the destruction around them and he sees the last of the starships crashed further away. But before he can put two and two together, an escape pod slams down a short distance away. The door slides open and out stumbles Talon. Oh yeah, there are 3 things that every Star Wars movie needs. A space battle, which we just had, a little bit of romance, which we had some of and we will have more of, and, of course, a lightsaber battle. Now both Obi-Wan and Talon have both just stumbled out of crashes, so neither of them is in top-notch condition, but they're both equally busted up, so they should be matched for this fight. As they both nurse their injuries, they lock eyes, and each one slowly reaches for their lightsaber. Without a word, they both begin to walk towards each other, around chunks of busted metal and patches of fire. Talon swipes her hand, sending a wrecked ship putt towards Obi-Wan. He calmly raises his hand, blocking it, and it's squashed flat like a pancake in the air, before dropping to the ground with a clunk. They continue towards each other. Talon ignites her blade. Obi-Wan does the same. They charge towards each other and lock blades. Obi-Wan is the better swordsman, keeping Talon on the defense, but she is much faster, managing to dodge many of his strikes. They intersperse their saber swings with blasts of force, probing each other for weaknesses. At one point, Obi-Wan and Talon lock blades for a few seconds. Obi-Wan looking at her through their glowing saber blades, he whispers, "Your brother has trained you well, but who trained him?" She looks momentarily taken aback that he's able to sense that Darth Maul is her brother. This gives Obi-Wan an opportunity to smack her in the back of the head with a chunk of metal. He swipes her lightsaber from her grasp and force pushes her back into some debris. Not only do they have to concentrate on their saber fighting, but also on keeping up their force defenses. As soon as one of them is focused more on their lightsaber, they leave themselves open for a force attack, and vice versa. Kinda like what happened here. This is why the Jedi place so much importance on concentration and focus, because as soon as they lose focus, they leave themselves open for an attack. She sits up and fires lightning at him. He dives out of the way, and she force pulls her lightsaber back towards her. When Obi-Wan's saber flies over, cutting hers in half at the handle, before returning to Obi-Wan's hand. Now disarmed, Talon jumps to her feet and in desperation starts flinging everything she can at Obi-Wan, as he calmly swats them away as he walks towards her. Seeing that this has no effect, she then tries one last blast of lightning that Obi-Wan absorbs with his saber blade, before tripping her with the Force, dragging her towards him, and before she knows it, his saber is right under her chin, and it is over.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Obi-Wan levitates some strips of metal from nearby wreckage and warps them into handcuffs, binding her hands together. You will be brought before the Jedi Council to answer for your crimes. A holocron on her belt starts beeping and Obi-Wan takes it. Back at Maul's base, he's trying to contact Talon when the hologram of Obi-Wan pops up instead. Darth Maul, I presume. Maul's face crunches into a sneer. And you are? Obi-Wan Kenobi. Your fleet is destroyed. Your associate is in my custody. And my reinforcements will arrive at the capital before your ground forces can reach it. And without any starships, you won't be able to leave this planet. This war is over. But if you order your forces to surrender to the Jedi when they arrive, I give you my word, no more of your men will die. Oh, my Jedi friend, very little do you truly understand. The shroud of the dark side has already fallen. Can you not sense it all around you? And as for my army, these clones have a life expectancy of 3 years. Their time in this galaxy is short, and they know that. So I assure you, every last one of them would rather die in battle than die sitting in a Republic prison. However, it seems that you do have an opportunity to save some lives here. 118 to be exact. What do you mean? I have 118 hostages held here in my command center. Ah, using them as human shields, no doubt. Yes, my Jedi friend. And I was going to execute them when we moved out to attack the capital, but it seems that you now have a hostage of your own. Obi-Wan turns to look at Talon, who is smirking back at him. I'm willing to make a trade. 118 lives in exchange for 1. Obi-Wan frowns. No doubt you are hoping to take her back to the Jedi Temple for questioning. And if you consider 118 innocent lives to be a fair price to pay for that, I will understand if you reject my offer. Obi-Wan thinks for a minute. Bring your hostages with you when you march your army up here. I'll meet you at the outskirts of the capital. He ends the call without waiting for a response, and turns to see a bunch of vehicles approaching from the city. It's the Prince and Padme coming for them. They arrive and they collect Anakin, who is still unconscious, and Obi-Wan tells them to leave one of the vehicles here for him because he's going to wait for Maul to arrive for the exchange. Padme and the Prince ride with Anakin on their way back to the city. Now all Obi-Wan need do is wait. Wait for the 200 Jedi and the transports to arrive. Wait for Maul and his army to arrive at the city for the exchange. And as he waits, his mind turns to what Darth Maul said about the shroud of the dark side falling. Obi-Wan clears his mind and he stretches out into the Force. He can feel that indeed the Force is in a state of flux between the light and the dark side. He's not sure exactly what this means, but he does know that this disturbance is focused right here on Alderaan. But he knows that whatever this disturbance is going to become, it will be big and it will start right here. Behind Obi-Wan stands Qui-Gon, who is not his former master, because Obi-Wan was trained by Yoda.
Was I any different when you taught me?
So Qui-Gon here is just another Jedi who has a tough warrior's edge because he's Liam Neeson, which is why he's taking the lead for this Jedi army. Behind Obi-Wan stands a line of 200 Jedi and the transport ships evacuating the last of the city's people. On the opposing side is lined up all of Darth Maul's ground forces, and they look raring to go. And standing alone in between the two armies is Darth Maul himself, defiant and without fear, next to a tank-like vehicle that contains the 118 hostages. Obi-Wan walks Talon out to meet him as Qui-Gon wishes him luck, and Maul opens the door releasing the hostages before Obi-Wan even has to ask, and they run past Obi-Wan as Qui-Gon is calling them to run towards him. Releasing Talon, she walks over to Maul and he peels off her handcuffs with the Force before looking up at Obi-Wan. That was an impressive display of power destroying my ships. If I had to guess, I'd say that was due to the transference of power by many, many Jedi. But I thought that was forbidden for a Jedi to do. Well, that is rather slippery of you all. You don't seem to mind bending the rules when it serves your purposes. Who knows? Perhaps the Jedi and the Sith are more similar than it would seem. He turns to leave and Obi-Wan calls after him. Be mindful of your thoughts, my friend. They betray you. Maul looks back. I can sense the love you have for your sister. Surely it's buried deep beneath layers of hatred, but it's there. I can feel it. Perhaps you're right. Maybe we are more similar than it would seem. They each return to their respective sides, and Qui-Gon tells him that his work here is done and that he should now go and be with Anakin on the last of the transport ships that's about to leave. But Obi-Wan's a little unsure, because he kind of feels that Maul was just way too calm and way too collected, and that there has to be something else going on here. But Qui-Gon's like, yeah, chill out bro, we can handle it, don't worry about it. You should really be with your apprentice right now. He needs you the most at the moment. So Obi-Wan leaves and he goes to get on the transport. And as the two sides close in on each other, with each step they take getting closer to each other, Obi-Wan gets closer to the transport. And as the two sides reach battle distance from each other, and Obi-Wan finally steps onto the transport ship, all of the Jedi lightsabers ignite. The clones raise their firearms and... You might be asking, why don't they just deflect their laser blasts with their lightsabers like they normally do? Well, because this is the first time that the Jedis have ever come up against blasters before, so they don't even know they're supposed to do that. They were expecting bullets to come flying at them, which they can easily block with the Force. But instead, laser blasts came at them, which they can't block because it's energy. That's why they all got shot. And yes, I know in Empire Strikes Back, Vader did block a couple of laser blasts from Han Solo, but he wasn't blocking them with the Force, he was blocking them with the metal in his robot hand. That's why there were sparks flying off it. If he was using the Force to block it, there wouldn't be any sparks. But a few of the more skilled Jedis, like Qui-Gon, do manage to deflect their fair share. But since they're stuck out in the open and there's just thousands of lasers flying at them, even the very best of them can't hold out forever. And doesn't this also go to show as to why it is that the Jedis would hate blasters so much?
So uncivilized.
Not as clumsy or random as a blaster. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
I mean, before they were invented, the Jedi were pretty much invincible, but now, anybody who can get their hands on a blaster could potentially kill a Jedi. So it makes sense that they would hate blasters so much. And it also makes sense that Palpatine would be the brain behind their creation, as wiping out the Jedi is one of his ultimate goals. Now, if we really wanted to, we could throw in a quick saber duel between Qui-Gon and Maul, but I don't really think it's necessary. And as the last of the Jedi are cut down, we see the last transport ship flying away from Alderaan, and Obi-Wan collapsing in a hallway as he feels through the Force the death of so many Jedi. Elsewhere in the transport ship, in the hospital where Anakin is still unconscious, Padme and the Prince are keeping a vigil next to his bed, when a doctor walks in and the Prince asks whether or not Anakin will survive. The doctor says that he will survive, but his nervous system has been completely traumatized. So either he will recover fully and he'll be okay, or he'll have to end up inside an iron lung that regulates all of his bodily functions for him. Or perhaps they might be able to build for him a portable iron lung that he can wear as a suit so that he can still walk around and function. Huh? Huh? Ah. The young prince looks at Anakin in the hospital bed and he says, "Our world may be lost, but our people are safe, thanks to him. He is the savior of Alderaan. And you know what? I'm sure he always will be." Well, thanks so much for watching, guys. I congratulate you if you made it all the way to the end of this. And yes, I have made this as the first part of a full trilogy, so there's going to be Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, continuing the story of this alternate version of the prequels. In fact, the script for episode 2 is pretty much already finished. I'm just putting the last few finishing touches to it, so I'm going to begin work on that right away. But as you guys can tell, yes, it's a completely alternate version of Star Wars history. In fact, the point where Revenge of the Sith ends in the actual movies, you know, with all the Jedis being killed, Palpatine taking over, Luke and Leia being born, that's actually where my episode 2 is going to end. So there's going to be a whole nother movie of Anakin really becoming Vader and hunting Jedis across the galaxy. And we're going to see exactly how and why Luke and Leia got separated and what all the circumstances for that were. So I'm very excited to get the story out to you guys. So if you're clicking here in episode 2 and nothing's there, it will be there in the near future. But in the meantime, you can click right over here to catch my Batman v Superman version. The animations are way worse than these. It's almost embarrassingly bad, but I think the story is still kind of okay. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and until next time, I will see you in the comments.